Good morning. My name is Brenda Schaefer-Pellenin, and I'm with the Arrowhead Regional Consortium for Healthcare Staffing. I would like to welcome you and thank you for joining us for today's session on unlocking potential second chance hiring in healthcare. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. We are recording the entire webinar. The recordings will be available on our Arrowhead Regional Consortium for Healthcare Staffing YouTube channel for later viewing. You can subscribe there to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with the latest additions to our video library. Please keep your microphone set to mute. Just a note, if you experience any issues with your bandwidth or with audio quality, it often helps to disable your camera. If you have questions during today's session, please feel free to enter those questions into the chat and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. We'll also take some additional questions at that time. At the close of today's session, you will see a quick evaluation of today's session pop up in your browser. Please take a moment to complete that survey. It helps us greatly when planning for future events. We are always looking for suggestions for future webinar topics. If you have suggestions for topics or speakers, please feel free to include those in your evaluation submission. One last quick reminder, visit our Facebook page for more information about other upcoming sessions. You can also check out our website at archesmn.com. If you'd like, you can enter your first name and the organization or community that you're from in the chat box and what you're hoping to get out of today's session and how you found out about it. We are pleased to have with us today Shayla Drake and Jason Beckman. Shayla Drake is the Northeast Workforce Strategy Consultant with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED. Her work focuses on developing innovative workforce solutions by aligning resources, facilitating collaboration, and leveraging experience in targeted industry sectors that drive economic equity and growth. Shayla currently serves on both the workforce development boards for Northeast Minnesota, and since 2018 has served as a member and former co-chair of the Healthcare Working Group for the Duluth Workforce Development Board. She previously led the statewide Healthcare Working Group, which has been elevated and absorbed into the Caring Professions Working Group of the Governor's Workforce Development Board. Shayla is a former direct care professional who transitioned in careers to help others navigate not only the health and human services industry, but also all industries. Shayla is SHRM certified and obtained her BS in business with a focus on human resources management at Western Governors University. Jason Beckman is the program director for SOAR Career Solutions in Duluth. As the program director, Jason oversees 20+ grants and 9 staff that serve 500 job-seeking clients each year. 100 of those clients are returning to the community from incarceration. Jason serves as the president of the Northland Career Development Professionals Association and is involved with multiple employer groups focused on reentry and employment. Jason has 20+ years of human services experience, previously working as a CNA, vocational counselor, armed worker, transitional housing case manager, and career specialist focused on person-first goal setting and attainment. Jason has a BS in psychology with a criminal justice minor from Metropolitan State University, as well as a master's degree in business administration and management from the College of St. Scholastica. Thank you, Shayla and Jason, for being with us today, and I will now turn things over to you. We're going to get started with our presentation first, and then we will have some examples from employers in the region, and then we'll see where we're at in terms of time. Thank you, guys.
Well, good morning, everybody. Shayla, you want to get us started?
Okay, I was on mute. I had to unmute myself there. Okay, I was looking for it. I have 3 screens here. Okay, wanted to make sure I was off mute. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Yes, perfect. Great. All right. So with that, thanks for that introduction, Brenda. So with that, I'm Shayla Drake, and that is Jason, Program Director with SOAR. And with that, I will let Jason take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. As introduced, my name is Jason, and I love talking about second chance rehiring. So one of the things we wanted to have a little bit of a ground break or a icebreaker question, and so this is going to be interactive. So going to have you either answer verbally, unmute yourself and chime in, or just throw it in the chat. If you go back one more screen, what is a criminal? So I just want to get some popcorn. So if you think of a criminal, give me a word that you associate with criminal. I'm going to just give us 1 minute to throw some stuff in the chat so you're not too rushed for it. So go ahead and start adding things in the chat. It could be a personality trait. It could be what you know from TV. It's like, what does a criminal mean to you? So just throw some stuff in the chat. So far, we've got someone who committed a crime being caught by the law is irrelevant. Good insight, Annie. Anyone else when you think of a criminal? Babysitter, does that come to mind? And why not? So something comes to mind. It can't be wrong, folks. It's just an opinion. So that's a minute. I was hoping we'd get a little bit more into that, but Shayla, what do you come up with? What is a word or two that you associate with a criminal?
Everybody.
Yeah. So what is a criminal is a wide statement. So a criminal is a person who has gone against our code of laws. So ask yourself, have you ever gone against our code of laws? This is more to Annie's point. And raise your hand if you've never broken a law. Go ahead in the reactions on your Zoom there. There's a little raise hand. So I'd like to see if anybody has never committed a crime, because that would be a first time that we've ever had that happen. So seeing no hands, I'm going to assume that most people have committed some type of a crime. And then the difference between a criminal and you is they got caught. Any other differences? Anybody want to chime in on a difference besides that? A criminal history means you've done something, and a criminal record means somebody found you out. So what we're talking about today is the second part of this, the people who've gotten caught. Why are they not a good hire? Why is it that they are discriminated against? We don't know. Well, we do know. It's called bias. And so when I asked you that first question about what is a criminal, and you didn't want to write down the stuff because you thought, well, that sounds kind of judgy, you were right. We do a lot of judging on stuff we don't know. It's called the false consensus effect from a psychology standpoint. When you don't have all the information, you take the information you have and make a consensus with it, which typically is not based in reality. We know a lot about criminals from television and from movies. We know a lot about criminals from the newspaper, but those are only certain criminals. We don't know about people from those stories. So as we move forward, we want to just kind of keep that in mind, that the people we're talking about today are just like you, with one exception: they got caught. And we'll talk about a website that dives into that a little bit more deeply as we move along. So thanks. Any questions before we move on? Excellent. Moving on to the next slide, please. So when people are coming out of incarceration, what we see is they need a lot of stability building. So it's going to be housing, it's going to be mental and physical health support, it's going to be community support. But all of that stems from income. Once you have your own income, you can make your own choices. When you're dependent on income from someone else, you're dependent on the hoops they set up for that income. So as an employment agency, we focus on the employment side of it, but we know, as the last bullet says, just having a job is not a silver bullet. If you don't have a place to stay when you're done with work and change your clothes and take a shower, coming back to the work the next day, you might only make it a few days before the boss says, hey, this isn't working out for us. So we know it's a part of the plan. It's not the only piece of the plan. Positive impacts of employment: you get increased pro-social activities. People coming out of incarceration have been changed. They have been socialized into a group living environment where they do not get to make many choices. And it's a very different place out here, the real world. We have a lot of folks coming out acting hard, if that makes sense, that term, where they, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at me? Like, this kind of stuff, because that's how you got by and you survived in the prison environment. And then once you're out, you don't have to be so hard, because that's not how we work in society. So we do a lot of that, increasing your pro-social activities, taking cues from people that you're out with to see how are they doing, how are they reacting when news comes up. It definitely contributes to families and stability, for some personal supports and the decisions you get to make. Positive relationships, because you're going to have somebody you're relying on, or is relying on you as part of a team at work. Self-esteem. We have a lot of folks that are getting out, and the first thing they'll tell us is, well, nobody hire me. I have 11 felonies. I'm not employable. They've kind of told themselves that. And Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're correct. And we see that a lot. So a lot of our job is changing people's minds about themselves and upping their low self-efficacy. And then mental health, less stress means less problems. So if you have a job and you have someplace to be and you have some income and there's still problems, right? Budgeting is always a problem for all of us. But the I'm not going to eat today is a different problem than, oh, how do I save enough to buy a new something, right? All right, questions, moving on. Great, next slide. I don't see any hands up. So I talked about bias just a little bit ago, and when we talk about the unemployment rate of formerly incarcerated folks, for the first year that they're out, the unemployment rate is higher than the national unemployment rate during the Great Depression. And it's been consistently that since the Great Depression. So there's a lot of people in this group that are looking for employment. And there's a lot of employers right now saying, oh, nobody's applying. Well, we're here to try to maybe bridge that gap. We have people who are looking, you have people who are, you are people who are in need. Where can we meet in the middle? Employer fears about that potential loss of money. They believe that criminals are living a lifestyle, and there is evidence of that, but it's not down to the individual, right? The recidivism rate in the U.S. is about 70%, so we know that a lot of people that get out do go back, but the 30% don't. And so how do you figure those folks out? One of the things we do here at SOAR is a lot of that case management. Our last year, our recidivism rate was just under 30%. The year before that was at 16%. So we stay quite a bit below the national average. Our reputation is I don't want to be known for hiring those people. We have had employers find themselves on a felony-friendly list that some local nonprofit has put together, and employers are really upset that they're like, I don't want to be associated with that. And the question is why? And the answer is typically face. They don't want to lose face. They don't want to be seen as that person who works with those people. And back to the bias. People make a lot of assumptions about our criminals, called people who are re-entering society from incarceration. Those people will be untrustworthy, unreliable, have poor work performance. And that's possibly true when they went in. A lot of them are in jail because they were untrustworthy or unreliable and had a poor work performance. But things have changed in the last 6 to 20 years that they've been sitting. And so to say that you are the same as 6 to 20 years ago would be weird. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I eat the same things. I watch the same stuff. I drive the same. No, hardly anything is different about you. Your name has stayed the same. Pretty much everything has changed. Why wouldn't you assume that for these folks as well? Not quite sure, but it's one of the biases we run into. Next slide, please. Recidivism. I can train this person. They'll probably go back to prison. From an HR perspective, that's a bad investment. We understand that new people are an investment to a company. The first week or 6, depending on the job, the person is actually not making the company money. They're just absorbing resources because they're in a training spot. As an HR person, you'd say, yes, I will take that few weeks of investment so that I get some years of performance. People aren't willing to give justice and all folks a chance because they think that recidivism is going to come and get them. And that's where I'd say, look into the individual. Some individuals we talk to are not a good fit for our program, and so they don't come to work with us. Folks, when we talk to them in prison, they're like, yeah, when I get out, I'm just not going to do that stuff with Bobby anymore because Bobby was a narc, and that's why I'm in here. That's probably not a good fit for our program. That's a person who wants to go back to their criminogenic lifestyle, and that's okay. This is America. You can make your own choices. The people who said, you know what, I've been living this for 20 years. I've been in and out a bunch of times, and every time I get out, I can't get anything going, and therefore I don't really have a reason to not go back. It's actually easier for some people to go back because they do have food and clothing and shelter then. Once they come out and have a reason to not go back, they definitely stay out much longer and don't go back at all in many cases. But it's that once they can kind of get their feet under it and get a little bit ahead of steam, now they have a reason to err on the side of non-criminogenic thinking. I hired someone with a criminal background and it didn't work out. I asked a friend of mine who owns a residential construction company about this, and he's like, yeah, I've hired some of those folks. I said, and did they work out? No. And I said, well, how many of those folks haven't worked out? Oh, he says. So he had about 5 or 6 people in this category. He's like, yeah, I don't know. They didn't really work out. He had 100 people in the other category that didn't have a criminal background that washed out, that got fired, that left the job. But yet his bias was just towards these 6. And he kind of just discounted those other 100 as, well, that's just the way it is. Huh? So when you start thinking about some of your biases, and if you want to contact me directly and say, well, what about this? I can have that conversation with you all day because most of the biases aren't rooted in fact. They might be rooted in stats, saying that this group, these 350,000 people that are incarcerated do these types of things. But I'm asking about the individual, this person here, Dave. What does Dave do? And if you're not asking what Dave can do, I think you're missing out on some potential opportunities. Next slide, please. So the realities are, the data backs us up with this, is as ex-offenders are less likely to quit their jobs than non-offenders and perform just as well as non-offenders. We see this anecdotally here at SOAR. People who are given the chance, again, they come out, oh, no one's going to hire me. Oh, it's just going to be a life of destitute. When they are given a chance, they are very thankful for that chance, and they are very loyal to that employer. I've had people coming in feeling bad about having to resign and take that next job as they're stepping up because this person gave them a chance and they feel an onus to them. So it's the opposite once people start getting going of what employers are expecting. Unemployment rates are as high as 60%. So again, we have people. Will they fit into the DHS stuff? Hey, Shayla will talk about that in a minute. So I know you guys are thinking, well, what about DHS? We're going to get there. And then more than 80% of U.S. employers perform criminal background checks on prospective employees. In the healthcare system, you are mandated to. But are you mandated for all of the positions at your facility? And that's kind of the question that we're now asking healthcare facilities. It's easier, 100% it's easier to say everybody that works in this system is going to be through this background check. But does it need to be there, or is it just an easier part from an HR perspective? And then 92% of employers, large employers, are using the background checks. What is the purpose? The background check industry is going to top $2 billion this year. $2 billion that companies are spending out of their profits to check to see if someone got caught. And what does that tell them? It tells them they got caught, but what else does it tell them? It tells them whatever their bias believes. That's what it tells them. So again, the fact that we're doing background checks can be useful. If we're not narrowing the background checks to certain things that affect your business, then it's not as useful. So if you are a retailer and you don't want to hire someone who's a thief, that makes sense. So now you'd run a background check and you just flag thief. If they were a bad driver and if they got 4 DUIs in 6 years and had to go spend 2 years in prison, how does that hurt you as a retailer? How does that hurt a salesperson? It doesn't. It's a totally separate thing. But that felony looks bad, and so now they're not offered the position. So again, we're asking to stop looking at the group and break it down into the individuals. Last slide, please. Or next slide. The 2/3 of ex-offenders are arrested for a new offense within 3 years after release. That's the nationwide stat, and that's where a lot of our bias comes from. So I'm saying, don't take the nationwide as an individual's path. Statewide rates are from 31 to 70%, depending on how long people have been in. The longer they've been in, the less likely they are to go back. So people who serve 20 years have a lower chance of going back than someone who served 1 year. The 1 year folks, again, haven't had as long to time out. They haven't had that come to Jesus moment that folks come to in prison, like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. I got to do something different. So people who were placed in jobs definitely reduce their recidivism. So a lot of those fears that we talked about in the last slides, like, oh, they're just going to disappear again. If they're employed at a level that's sustainable. Now, again, just getting a survival job 20 hours a week at $10, $15 an hour is not going to be enough to impact these stats. If you have a sustainable job where you get to make enough money to make a choice for yourself, then your recidivism rate goes down to about normal. The chance for an American to go to jail right now is at like 3%. So all of us are 0.3% difference from some of these folks who are previously incarcerated and now working. So again, the differences start to shrink when you start looking at individuals like that. So I think that's the end of my slides. I will turn it over to Shayla, and if anybody has any questions, you can shout them out at any point.
So as Jason had alluded to, we talked a little bit about the NET study, the background check process, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but just to kind of set the idea about what individuals kind of experience and go through. I'll take a step back, used to be in HR in healthcare. That's why I say we sometimes interchangeably, although now I'm in workforce strategy on the state side. So I used to have to do this process a lot. So sometimes I will interchangeably say we. So when initiating a study, you as an employer, you think of, okay, initiate the study, wait for the study to come back. That's pretty much the experience from the employer side. But from a client side or a participant side or the individual receiving the study, this is the cycle that they have to go through, right? The study is initiated, the payment is put in, the fingerprints in the photo is obtained. They're allowed to work under supervision until the results are received. If you're disqualified, you have to submit for an appeal, and then you're allowed to work under supervision until until the appeal is processed. And guess what? If you get hired somewhere else, the cycle has started all over again. And so this, if you think about it being like a hamster on a wheel or anything like that, this is a continuous loop. So for employers doing net studies and backgrounds and thinking about the justice involved process, and individuals that have a background, the courage that it takes these individuals to commit to a healthcare career or career in health and human services in general, they have to be committed to this industry to hop on this wheel and to be committed to this wheel. And so just even to think about this commitment and the humility, honestly, that it takes individuals to commit to this process, I think is something that needs to be recognized as an employer. And Jason was alluding to a little bit earlier about some of the types of convictions and exclusions a little bit earlier. We were talking about, is the babysitter a criminal and things like that. Sometimes it can be really surprising about the type of exclusions individuals can have. Possession of, stolen goods, bringing stolen goods into Minnesota. Sometimes, perfect example, you might not even realize you bought something from somebody that was a stolen good, and then you're possessing it, and then you get convicted of a stolen good. Sometimes things happen to individuals. Is it intentional criminality? Is it unintentional criminality? Who are we to know unless we give that individual an opportunity to have that discussion? Us as hiring agents or employers or whatever we call ourselves in that moment, if we're not giving these individuals that are committed to this industry and potentially our clients or whoever we're providing care for in this space, giving them the opportunity to say why they want to provide this care and provide this service, to say what happened in that moment when they either got caught, what happened in that moment, to say, it either was intentional or it wasn't. Sometimes it was totally intentional. Like Jason said, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, I messed up. But how many times have we messed up, and, but sometimes, if somebody isn't seeking, if they're seeking a job and they're like, you know what, I didn't care, I still don't care, and I'm not sorry for what I did, I don't think they would be seeking the background study and trying to go through this process. And so taking that moment of time to really work with individuals to see what can be done.
Hey, Sheila, can I jump in real quick about
Absolutely.
the 7-year disqualification? We had somebody coming in for a CNA training, and we did a proactive background check on them, just kind of looking up to make sure that they would pass in that study. And we didn't really see anything on there. They had a disturbing the peace. And so the net study said no, that the original charge was a 5th-degree assault because they were fighting with their brother or something. And so this is the only system in the state that's allowed to make discrimination based on charges. You as HR people are not, housing people are not. No one is allowed to make decisions based on charges only, yet the state of Minnesota can break their own laws. So the system is not perfect. That's why we're really urging employers to be that ally and help and be a friendly face, because this whole background check is a big chilling effect on people applying for this industry. They just say, nope, they don't even want to deal with this whole process. So one of the things we see is that employer engagement can maybe help bring some of those folks across the line.
Exactly. And so to Jason's point, what happens if somebody gets disqualified? In that case, what do? You have somebody, you want to give them this opportunity. You're like, you know what? I kind of like what Jason and Shayla are saying. I'm kind of on board with all of this. I have no idea how to even do, how to even be, pro people, pro I messed up, right? Like, how do I do this, right? So, really it kind of goes down, it's like a 4-step system, right? You identify a support team for the individual, and this is kind of what Jason's team kind of teach individuals too. They identify a support team. They can write letters of support for that individual in their situation, and you as an HR person, it's like, hey, I identified this person that I would like to hire. They seem to be a good candidate, and we would like to hire them for a position, and they can actually send that off with their letters that they're going to send for their appeal, and it can be one of the many that they're going to send. And they begin gathering those documentations. They mail it off for the appeal process, and you wait. And DHS says it can be up to 90 days. but that's not necessarily the case. I have seen them take 2 years and still be approved. So and mind you, in that time, they're still required to be supervised because they're not fully cleared, right? And so that I'll let Adam kind of get into some of this when we get into the employer piece here in a little bit, but there are options for employers. So when we're talking all of this, kind of the top tips and kind of did you know for employers, it's finding the people and for the clients, when we talk to the employers that really kind of want to do this, you find that person. Maybe the person that's coming in doesn't have a Jason to tell them, you know, find people to help you write a letter for your set aside that you're going to send to DHS. You know, I'm in HR. We want to hire you. We'll write a letter that we'd like to hire you. But you also go out and find a letter in the community. Maybe your PO, if you're on probation, can write you a letter about why you're not a threat to our population that we're serving. Or, you know, maybe there's letters from your court case, or even the judge can write you a letter of support, right, of why the set aside should be approved. Because the funny thing is the individuals over at at Net Study that are doing these set asides, they're not judges, they're not lawyers. It's a panel of individuals reviewing the case and saying a yes or a no on the set aside. So the more information that the individuals send for Net Study to approve or deny the set aside, the better. So that's number one. And then the more information from people, I guess people of clout, right? Leaders in the community or anything like that to send that letter of support, the better. And I would think, Jason, any other pro tips for that, help get that set aside across the finish line?
Yeah, put it in the job description.
Yeah, job
Are
description.
you worried about the background check? We are willing to help you through it. Just letting people know that you are an employer who is not going to judge them. Again, the people are coming here saying, I don't want to go there. I know I'm going to get denied. And so, yeah, but you might get a set aside. Nah, I'm not willing to do that. They don't believe the employer is on their side with this. They believe it's adversarial. So if you are an employer that is willing to do this and help people do that, it's going to take time. There's no doubt about it. HR people are going to have to take a little bit extra time with these individuals to get them across the line. Hopefully the end result is you do get that set aside and you get an employee who's willing to go through those hoops. So if you can socialize and if you can let people know we are an employer that helps people navigate this, you will get more applications of people who know that they have that problem.
Oh, and another good one. Many individuals will get denied on their first application for a set aside and then approved on their second appeal. So like, it's almost like they want to just see if you'll keep trying. Like if you really want to be approved. So I don't know. It's almost like there's a pattern. It's like an approval on the second application. It almost seems like there seems to be a pattern with Social Security disability applications. You get denied on your first time, you get approved on your second application. It seems to be the same thing with like Net Study set asides. You get denied on your first one and you get approved on your second round of applications. So I think that's another big one for individuals. Don't feel defeated if you get denied on your first go around. It almost seems to be par for the course and then put in for your second one.
And another thing is advocacy. So this is DHS background check is set up by the state, and it was conceived to help HR people protect themselves so that they're not hiring people to be a liability. You, as HR people, and if it's not, the system isn't working, speaking up to DHS, hey, can we change this? Just giving feedback. I don't know who that is at your company. I'm not exactly sure who at DHS, but I know there's a conduit. I can't complain because I don't use it. I'm not a licensed facility, so they don't care what I say. But if you guys, as HR people, saying, wow, this is taking a lot of time, what a complicated, goofy system, you guys are the ones that this system is built for. If you guys collectively can complain to DHS, maybe they'll hear it. If the whole state is saying this system is not as good as it could be, it's hurting us from a recruiting standpoint, perhaps DHS can come in there and fine tune some of these things. One of the things I would like to see if I had a magic wand was a pre-approval. Before I get to an employer, I could go to DHS and get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I could start working through a set aside. If I said I would like to work at long-term care facilities, I'd like to work at a hospital. Maybe there's like an application say I'm looking towards these types of things, and then you work through the set aside, and then I can show up at an employer with my set aside ready to go, and it's a lot less BS for everybody. But that's just me waving my magic wand. I don't have any power to implement that, and I don't have anybody to tell about that because DHS doesn't care what I have to say.
But exactly, and so there's a lot of ways to go, and there's a lot of work. We'll probably dig into possible next steps and solutions and how to go. We have some guides that we'll share here in a little bit. But with that, I will turn it over to Brenda and Adam, and then we'll take questions either at the end or now. We'll let Brenda handle that.
Thank you, Shayla and Jason. Unfortunately, one of our employer participants had to cancel for today, and so, but we are so lucky to have our other employer presenter here with us. So I'm going to let Adam introduce himself, and I think, you know, we'll just kind of keep things really loose. And Adam, if you don't mind, we'll just kind of treat this conversationally and kind of go through what your experiences have been with your organization.
Yeah. So my name is Adam Krisak. I work with the Center for Alcohol and Drug Treatment. I'm the director of HR over there. I do want to say, Shayla and Jason, those were great tips, by the way, and ideas regarding DHS and their background study within that study. Love them. So, all right.
All right. Well, we'll kind of jump in with some questions. So what would you say have been your biggest successes in this area?
When it comes to this specifically, I think one of our biggest successes just recently happened. We had a candidate come to us, probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, wanted to come on as a clinical assistant. They had an extensive background, criminal history, some issues with substance abuse, but we worked with them on getting their set aside and variance information in. And most recently, they've developed into a counseling position. They completed their education at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. And initially, there was a little bit of a bumps in the road with the Board of Behavioral Health and DHS as well on getting her approval. But we worked with her on that as well. What kind of response that she should draft to why she'd be allowed to practice counseling and things along those lines. And she just got that approved last month and is now working as a full-time counselor.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So if you had, Jace kind of alluded to this earlier, but if you had a magic wand and you could change anything to help advance these initiatives and to kind of smooth some of the obstacles, what would you do?
So I came in with my own thoughts on that, but I actually like Jason's more, full disclosure. My initial thought with that was that having organizations be able to pull other set-asides through DHS. I think that was maybe a concept at one point, but even interdepartmentally, if we have someone that needs a set-aside or is working on a variance, we have to initiate set-asides or variances for each of those programs. It's not just a company-wide thing. So having those be able to get pulled across from different areas or from other organizations would be fantastic. But Jason's idea of having a pre-approval where an individual goes ahead and gets their own pre-approved set aside variance background check would even be just as brilliant. So
it seems like one really great answer that doesn't stop, it still allows everything that is supposed to happen and all the goals of that to be met, but just makes things a little bit smoother. Yeah,
it would make things significantly smoother, especially if anyone is working cross fields. If they're an LADC working at Thunderbird House and they want to come do outpatient groups with us on the weekends, it'd be fantastic to have that cross information to get to us.
And I'm sorry, I should have said this from the beginning. Shayla and Jason, please feel free to chime in if you've got some additional comments.
I just have
some additional
quick question for Adam. So that success story you gave us, can you quantify in hours how much extra time HR spent with that person versus a person who didn't have a set aside? Is it like 4 or 5 hours, or is it like 10 or 20 hours?
It's probably somewhere in between. I think 6 to 8 probably is the most. 8 would be on the high end. 6 is probably more like what we're looking at. It was not an extensive amount of work to get them the set aside, how to help them with what paperwork to gather, how to answer questions about what if the charge was out of state. How do I respond to that if I don't get that information back? It's not super extensive what we're doing versus someone without a set aside.
Was it disruptive to your hiring process? So you have an opening and you got somebody to applied, and now that person can't start for 6 to 12 weeks while we're waiting. Can you talk about some of the employers have said the same thing? Like, I can't wait for this set aside business I need somebody today.
So yes, no. So most of the time when we get a denial, they're allowed to work with supervision, and we make that happen. We adjust their hours, we have them working and doing operations along those lines. If they do get denied where they can't work at all, it's not, I would say, disruptive. It's disappointing to not only us, but it's also disappointing to that candidate. But it's worth working through that process with them, because most of the time they're wanting to get back to work. They're really good at what they've done thus far, and they want to be working with in our industry. They want to be working with people.
And then, do you screen if somebody has? I mean, if they have something that's on the permanent disqualification list, maybe you don't offer that time to work and do the set asides. I mean, do you guys have any screening like that, or do you let everybody do the appeal process?
Everyone do the appeal process, because you never know what DHS is going to say. Some people really want to work in this field. We want to give them that chance. We don't turn anyone away. There obviously is a limit. If DHS says no, they can't apply for an appeal, no, they can't apply for the variance, then our hands are tied, of course, but we give everyone an opportunity.
So what changes have you made internally as an organization to make your efforts more successful?
So luckily, when I came into this organization, they're already doing second chance hiring pretty extensively. The issues that I kind of saw was it wasn't very clear about what the process was, or the fact that we made that known to the community at wide. So what I did with the organization is kind of flush out the process for people to apply for reconsideration, apply for variance, and then I made it more publicly known about how that process goes, how we can pull candidates who have a history, even people with substance abuse can work in this industry, and we make it known to them that we will help them throughout the process. Luckily, the center has always been about that. It's part of their mission and vision to make sure people's lives can go unabated. So it's really nice working with this organization and already coming into that with that mindset in place.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any mentors or support systems in implementing PEP policies?
Yeah, our current HR specialist has been working for the center for quite a few years, and she was already familiar with net study and the set aside process and things along those lines. So working hand in hand with her and setting up a very clear procedure on our end of things really made it very easy to make it viable, make it streamlined, and make sure that everyone on the operations end, compliance end, and then HR side knows what the steps will look like and what steps they need to take on both ends, whether they need supervision, whether they need to come in and get the paperwork done. All those things now are very clear with everyone within our organization. So that was super helpful having her, who's worked with the background study system for so long, having that knowledge. It was really great.
What benefits would you say that you're, as an organization, you guys have seen as a result of these efforts?
I would allude to what Jason said about people who want to work in this field are dedicated and stay. The people that we have coming in who want to work with us that have background history are grateful that we're willing to give them a chance. And there are some of our best employees. They are dedicated to the people that we serve. They're super high performing, and they have stayed with us. They have long longevity with us.
I can jump in there too. We see a lot of folks who have been through the system who now want to be part of the system. They've received some help. They had a different path for a few years, and now as they're coming back, they've used mental health counseling or chemical dependency counseling, peer recovery support specialists, all these professionals out in the community that they've used to get back, and they're really identified like, wow, that's something I can get behind. I want to help other people to get out of the pickle. And then DHS shows up and says, So that's one of the things we have that dedication, we have that interest. And so if we can find these little ways through, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Well, if we can stop seeing a stumble in our life as being something that's a character flaw. We all have had stumbles, and not necessarily just in the criminal area, but we've all had challenges. We've all had things, catastrophes in our lives and things like that we have survived through and that we've grown through. And so to think that someone who has gone through the criminal justice system is not experiencing that same thing and that same growth, I think is really very narrowly thought. Narrowly thought.
And that's where the bias is still raising its head, because this whole background check is we're judging you on what you did then instead of asking where you are now. So that's where the appeal process is really bringing it up to the present. Like, what are you doing now? And so the support from, say, SOAR writing a letter, an employer writing a letter saying this person is doing these types of things, they've been involved in these, and it's been this long since their last interaction with the criminal justice system. That's kind of nowing it, if that makes sense, because the initial thumbs up, thumbs down is from what happened 5 to 25 years ago.
What's in the rear view mirror? Yeah.
I ask parents a lot, do you have small children that act oddly? And would you anticipate they still act oddly 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Because if you do, that's a weird parenting style, to continue to parent someone like they're 3 when they become 15. They're a different person. Things have changed. They're not the 3-year-old anymore. They don't need the same rules and supervision that a 3-year-old needs. So it's really an easy analogy when you look at your own family and growth within it.
Mm-hmm. Shayla, Jason, did either of you have any questions for, or any thoughts with Adam that we might?
Adam, do you have a general win-loss with your appeals? Like, is it a 50-50 thing? Are you most of them coming in with a thumbs up, or how does it all shake out in the end?
I'll say this, if people are good at gathering their documentation and like going to come in and talk with HR, either myself or our HR specialist, we generally see a higher success rate compared to folks who kind of send it in on their own. They get their paperwork, they don't consult anyone, they just write a response really quickly and send it in. We see less success with that, but if people are willing to come in and get the assistance or get the knowledge of how to properly do this, we see a pretty good success rate.
And so if you guys are going forward with any job fairs or any out recruiting, having someone or a poster or something there saying, are you worried about the background check? Talk to us. I think you'll get some traction with that, because people are still, like I said, they're scared to bring it up to you, because who wants to go on that first date and talk about the bad stuff? Nobody. They want to talk about where I'm at now. What are my interests? What are my skills and abilities? They don't want to talk about, oh yeah, 3-4 years ago. Yeah, I guess. So again, letting people know that you are willing and you're welcoming them to come and do that set aside, I think that's going to help quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sheila.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things that during the interview process, whenever it was like we would move into the conversation of the selection, it was like, okay, we're going to be potentially maybe selecting this individual and maybe discussing background study, and it was like you could almost tell that was a fear that they were going to be moving into that stage. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about net study, and you could almost see the shutdown and break down the fear of HR even having that discussion, being like, you know what, let's not worry about it. We have a process in place. Let's have the conversation now. Not every conviction is excluding, it's only limiting, I think it's having HR be comfortable with those conversations and really being able to bring it up throughout the selection process, throughout the interview process, and not having it be a last portion of the process conversation either, right? So, hey, when we get to the net study portion, it's only select, things that DHS is looking for, net study is looking for. If you get an exclusion, we'll work through that when we get there. Then that way they don't feel like it's a thing every time. But I think that was one of the biggest things for candidates. You can almost see just like that buildup in fear, just even talking about it. And a lot of people choose to ignore that fear and then wonder why the candidates don't even go complete the net study. They wonder why, oh, well, I put in the paperwork, but they didn't go complete their fingerprints.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even have a chance to, do the background study appeal process because they didn't even complete the net study because they were too afraid to, engage in the process at that point.
Yeah, and I think that was a big step for us, is making that transparency. Like, your background is not the end all be all. I think I'm pretty sure all of our job postings now online or on our app, website or anything like that, all indicate that we do have to do a background check, but it also indicates that the center is a second chance employer. We'll help you through that appeal process if we need to. If it doesn't come to that, fantastic. They don't pull it, great. We'll go on, no issues whatsoever. But we're also willing to work with people on their variance if they have any kinds of restrictions, things like that. And we make that known.
And one other question for your system, Adam, is have you reduced the number of positions that are required to do a DHS background check? Have you teased some of those out so people who don't have direct service type of jobs like a food service or environmental or a truck driver, whatever, someone who's in your system but doesn't actually work with clients, do you make them do the DHS background check, or do you just skip that for some positions?
So we make everyone do a DHS background check, but if their position doesn't have direct client contact, if they get denied, we still employ them. So the only positions that really apply for us in that role are mostly financial, billing, and AP, or some administrative roles, because 95% of our positions will have some form of direct client contact, whether as a part of their job responsibilities or they're just working in that environment.
So it's harder to tease out a job that would never see a client, so you couldn't identify that person, and then just kind of skip the DHS bit. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so to that point though, Jason, there are like some settings versus like I could understand CADT because of the very small residential, like small home setting environment. It would be hard to separate those versus more facility settings that are larger in facility settings where you have a commercial kitchen where you could do cook in the kitchen and dietary aids that leave the kitchen versus where you actually maybe have, or facilities management that actually never engages with residents or resident care. What are the segments, or do they engage with the client population, and really looking at that, and does information, do they engage with the population and do they not, and really looking at that and evaluating the true risk to the population with these studies.
On that note, actually, I thought of something while Shayla was talking. We did have a person who worked in a facilities position that was initially denied a background check, and there was no option for a set aside or variance. We actually ended up switching their position, so they would work hours that wouldn't have any relationship with direct client contact. So we adjusted their position so that we didn't have to terminate them, because for the 7 months they were employed with us while their background was pending, they were exceptional. So we make adjustments when we see that talent, and now they've been with us for probably a year.
Do we have any questions out there participant wise? Any attendees who've got questions, either of our presenters or, if he doesn't mind, of Adam?
I've got one, and I don't really understand this because I'm not a lawyer, but I've had people at presentations come up and say that they, as a company, would be liable if they hired people with certain backgrounds because the employees can sue them. This is something kind of, it seemed like a big defense. I looked into it. It's a real legal thing. But has this ever come up to you, Adam, where you're like, oh, if we hire this person, it puts the other employees at some kind of a risk because of their background? I was like, whoa, that's a really weird reason. And this was an employer who basically had a blanket statement, said, nope, we're not hiring those people because they're a liability to our, like, getting sued from our current employees. I was like, okay. So I don't know, is anybody else hearing those worries?
I have never once had that happen. And I'm a pretty risk averse person when it comes to things. And I have never once had an issue with that at all. And people's backgrounds are their confidential information. They're allowed to share as much as they want with their coworkers, but they'll never hear that information from an HR standpoint.
Yes, there has been discussions about that and about liability and potential interest. And I really appreciate the Second Chance Business Coalition's report that they put out just February in 2024. I put that in the chat just now. And it talks about potential liabilities and being able to We know in healthcare, we're always talking about, you know, HIPAA, and then we talk about making sure, okay, we all know HR, way our files need to be maintained. But when we have individuals that are, you know, justice involved and maybe require additional supervision, how do we maintain, you know, that privacy for those individuals and that have been impacted and that kind of thing? So it talks about that a little bit. And it's fantastic. It's a great resource. And then at the very end, we could talk a little bit more about some of those things here in a little bit, but specifically, I throw some of them in the chat, specifics for healthcare, and a lot of the things that Adam had talked about and we've already talked about today, just guides on, you know, as an employer, things that you can do in your different settings, from, you know, acute care, facility-based center treatments, to implementing some of these strategies. Even financial services have information in here. So.
Well, I think if we don't have any other questions, I think it's a good segue. I know that Shayla and Jason have got some resources that they can share, some kind of suggested some actions going forward that folks can take, whether it's to educate themselves or to get more information on some of the topics.
So I just dropped that negligent hiring risk in the chat, and you guys can take a look at it. And then I linked a SHRM article about it, so you can kind of get some more information on it. But again, it was the first time I heard it. I was like, huh? And so I thought I would check in with other employers to see if they are under that same operating procedure. And so far, I haven't found very many who think it's a high risk. So, Shayla, you want to start talking about some of the resources we've got at the end of the slide?
Yeah, I sure can. And I just want to do this because I know we're recording, so it might just be easier just to have these in the recording. So I just wanted to share a couple of things that I had seen. So in a couple of the resources that I shared, that I thought this one was really impactful, and I wanted to kind of lead with the group for sure. For one, seizing the opportunity. So as a healthcare, this one is in here. It is in that SB, that report that came out. It's for one of the healthcare guides. But as the healthcare industry continues to grow, employers have an opportunity to launch innovative workforce development strategies. But what I thought was really impactful about healthcare specifically, we know healthcare is not necessarily a thriving industry, but it's an essential industry. Healthcare organizations help keep many communities afloat and steady, even in hard financial and uncertain times. So that right there was impactful to me. So adopting a hiring policy for people with records can help you achieve your business objectives while advancing your mission to serve the public. So I think understanding your mission as an organization and aligning that mission with what you're doing, I think would be really, really huge. I thought that was very impactful. So this is one of those hiring guides. Melody is a success story. She had been impacted by a drug conviction and now works for the Department of Veterans Affairs through Justice Impact Work. 70 million people in the US have a record. So kind of what we were talking about earlier about kind of the difference between being convicted of a crime and not being convicted of a crime, it really is negligible. I've been stopped and given a ticket. I think all of us can say we've done something. It's just, what do we consider criminal history and what do we not consider criminal history? It's all in the eyes of the beholder. Incarceration of women grew 700% between 1980 and 2014. So I think, the more that we talk about the impact of criminality in the United States, the more that it impacts the healthcare industry. When we think about in the state of Minnesota, what is it, 25% or 1 in every 4 jobs is in health and human services, but yet we think of how many individuals have been impacted by criminality. Where's our labor pool going to come from if we don't start changing our view sets on employability? So I think that's one thing that I wanted to point out there. And then the other, which, there we go. With appropriate screening and hiring of individuals, we talked here, employers might be tempted to implement strict hiring policies that err on the side of caution, but screening out individuals that have criminal records can actually cause more restrictions for them as an employer and just give ourselves more problems, right? So the benefit for employers is opening up your talent pool. You're actually giving your clients more individuals to be interacting with. So I think when we look at the potential for our clients, if you look at individuals diversifying your workforce, there are barriers for employers to learn. But when we think about not having a talent pool, I don't think that's one of the options. Jason, do you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of DEI work going on in the community as well. And so some HR people have a directive to start trying to hire a more diverse background. And if you look at criminal rates or incarceration rates, our BIPOC populations have a double to triple the incarceration rate of white folks. So if you have a DEI focus and you're saying we're going to attract more people of color, but you're not doing any of these things to address the societal problem of people of color being arrested and convicted at a higher rate than white folks, you're only doing kind of half the job. And so if you actually want to attract folks, you're going to have to make your systems a little bit more welcoming, and that's where the screening and individualized. I think that's what I was really focusing on Shayla's bit here. Is it's an individual assessment. It's not, oh, you're a felon, you're out, and that's where we're just asking people to take that a little bit extra time and kind of sort through.
And one thing that was really interesting too was that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, we don't hire individuals with criminal records, you know, we don't do that. But what was really funny to me was if you look, I believe, yeah, so right here, in 2011, the Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General conducted a study of over 15,000 Medicare certified nursing facilities, and 92% of them did employ individuals with a criminal record. So why do we still have to have these conversations about justice-involved hiring? It's because there's a continued stigma of the word criminal record, criminal history, background study, and then we don't do advocacy. Like Jason said earlier, it's all about that advocacy. It's all about self-advocacy, you know, community advocacy, and, you know, helping get individuals past that finish line. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to point out was healthcare is the fastest growing industry, which we know. But we talk about, it's going to be like Jason was talking about, developing an outreach and engagement strategy, like he was talking about Adam, about letting individuals know that you're open and you're willing to hire, that, you know, it's, you know, we're willing to hire anyone and everyone that wants to work here as long as we can figure it out. Like, you know, we're willing to work together to serve our communities. A lot of times we have, you know, older adults, we have youth with disabilities, we have, you know, all kinds of individuals from, you know, the spectrum that need support. And we have individuals that are willing to service these people, and we don't want to allow them to assist. It's like, why are we, you know, I don't understand the disconnect. So I think that's the biggest point, is developing that outreach strategy to say, how can we work together to serve our communities and each other as a whole? So, Jason?
And I know you guys aren't higher education, but one other crowbar in the machine here is that if I'm putting someone into a CNA training because they want to get into this field, and we can't pass the DHS background check in order for them to do clinicals, I'm not sure why they need the DHS background check, because they're not doing things on their own. DHS clearly says that if you, while they're in that determination, you have to be supervised. To Craig's point, he made amends for that, right? He changed the position so somebody could keep on working while that determination is being happening. So while I'm in a training, I'm definitely supervised. As far as I know, I'm not just sent to a facility and say, okay, go do the work now. But yet they also require a DHS background check. So that keeps people out of the training, and therefore they can't even get to the point of doing a set aside with the employer because they've been ruled out preliminarily. So again, I'm just trying to let you guys know about a couple of other hiccups in the system that are really chilling the effect of your recruiting efforts.
Absolutely. So, so the only other thing that I want to touch on, so I sent this skills-based hiring is another one, Jason, we were talking about your job descriptions, evaluating the job descriptions. Do they have to have the certain certifications, such as like Jason was talking about CNAs? Can they come in as a PCA, do the background study, and then go over and take CNA certification courses, CNA classes, because in that way they've already got the background study through you as an employer. And then now they can, take their certification courses. So I think there's a lot of conversations to be had there. Skills-based hiring is huge when it comes to a lot of these populations. There's individuals that say, I don't have any knowledge or education or training, but we're like, you have a lot of skills. What can we figure out for these transferable skills that align with, these industries? So I think that is one. When we put this in the chat, there's a lot of information that was in this SBDC guide. When we're looking at these recruitment and retention resources, I think going in here, digging in here, rolling up your sleeves and saying what applies best to my work site, my organization, from small to large. It's not about jumping in and doing everything. It's about what applies to your size and scale of your organization, right? Some people are like, I can't do it all. You don't have to. It's just about being a good partner employer to a person, right? Like Jasu is saying, it's about Dave, right? What did Dave do? And what's Dave's issue? And what can we get Dave this job? Because I like Dave. Or maybe it's Mary or whatever that, Mary had an issue 15 years ago and we have to do the set aside. It's not about, maybe it is thinking about it on a larger 5,000 employee system, but we do have to take it down to an individual level.
Any questions or anything that anyone would like to add?
I'd like to throw in there that we, Shayla and myself and a bunch of other people in the community, can take some of this off of the HR folks. Like, we can be the coordinator. So if somebody comes to your office and they get a denial and there's going to have to be some process of working through, have them call us. This is what we do. What we would then reach back out to you and say, can you give me the letter that says you would like to do, and we can help the person with all that navigation stuff if your HR team doesn't have the 4 to 6 to 8 hours that Craig was mentioning earlier. So I'll drop our website in the chat. And again, if people are coming to your office and they need help with any of this stuff, that's a reasonable place to send them. Is, hey, go down to SOAR and try to get some help, or go down to Career Force and try to get some help. There are definitely people in the community that can take some of that work off the HR person's plate, and then the HR person gets the person back in a few weeks with the thumbs up and everybody's on their way. So just throw that out there as a resource.
That's a fantastic point. Yeah, because to that slide I was talking about earlier about gathering documentation and they can send it off along their way. I didn't even think about that part. Like, you're like, what documentation? It's the letters of support to support the set aside, right? Some people don't realize that's what they're all going to need. So, as an HR person, you can help write a letter of support to support that individual getting a set aside. And Jason, to that, is helping individuals gather documents that they will also be sending for those set asides. So you as HR do not actually have to help them gather all those documents and all of that. It's understanding what the process is and then helping talk them through what those steps are. And some people are just fine with going off and doing all of those steps on their own. We're not saying that you as HR have to be a career counselor and help individuals navigate all of those processes. Nobody has that kind of time, but there are agencies like SOAR and like Career Force that have individuals that understand that process, that can help be your partner and help navigate. So you have someone that you're interested in, you're willing to write a letter for that person to help them send along their way. And then you'll be like, hey, Jason, I've got somebody, I'm going to send to you to also help them gather their documentation that we're going to be wanting to that we're working with on hiring.
Great. Thank you guys so very much. We're going to give you back a little bit of your day. We are, as I mentioned, we are recording today's session, and so I will be sending a link out with that, as well as the links that Shayla and Jason posted in the chat. If you have any further questions, you can feel free to email me back and I can put you in contact with them. But amazing, great presentation and such good resources. And I think it's just, half the battle is just knowing that there are folks like Career Force and SOAR out there who you're not alone, and that you can that can help you and help the prospective employee navigate the system. So.
Also, just a quick plug, we just got a new round of DEED funding, and we're going to be training CNAs and other health services workers, people on the non-blood and gut side, the admin side, as well as human services training from Fond du Lac is going to be kind of shrinking their two-year course down into a smaller certificate. So if you have people applying that aren't ready, they just don't have the education or skills that you need, have them call us. Maybe we can get them skilled up a little bit and they can turn around and come back and be your employee.
All right. With that, we will say goodbye for the day, and thank you, Jason, Adam, and Shayla for sharing your experience and your wealth of knowledge, and thank you everyone for attending and learning more about this. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.